Hello, I'm Stuart Craner, co-founder of the Thinkers 50. Welcome to the third session in the Reimagine the Future Summit. 24 hours of fantastic insights and practical thoughts on creating a new future and being on a front foot for the future. So thank you to all our participants for being with us today. Thank you to all our supporters who've enabled the event to take place, to turning in from a bright idea into reality. And remember that all the profits from the event go to non-profits working to alleviate the impact of COVID-19 in Europe and America. Some great charities are benefiting, like No Kid Hungry, European Food Banks Federation, Give Directly, and so on. We've got a great session lined up following on from the first two sessions by Martin Lindstrom and Scott Anthony. A reminder that if you want to ask questions throughout the session, just put it in the Q&A box. There's also a chat box. Let us know where you're watching from. I just see somebody from Peterborough in the UK. He's up very early in the morning watching this session. Nice for you to join us. And there'll be people joining throughout the world throughout the session. This session features three professors from the business school INSEAD: Ian Woodward, Sameer Hasija, and Paddy Padmanabhan. They're professors at INSEAD in Singapore, contribute to the advanced management program at INSEAD, and they are authors of a forthcoming book called The Phoenix Encounter Method. So they're here to tell us all about the ideas behind the book and the ideas which they usually share with people on the advanced management program at INSEAD. So it's great to have them here. I'm going to give the virtual floor to Ian Woodward. Ian, it's yours.
Right, thank you, Stuart. Thank you to all who've been involved in creating this Reimagine the Future virtual summit throughout today, the 24 hours and lots of different speakers. Together with my colleagues, Paddy and Sameer, who are professors at INSEAD, we're going to talk about the Phoenix Encounter Method and some ideas that have come from our research over the last 4 years, research and field trials, with more than 1,500 C-suite executives to be able to help reimagine futures. We had no idea when we started this research of COVID-19 and how relevant the method is for people to be able to have the kind of strategic dialogue that they need. This is an unprecedented crisis: health, social, economic. And a crisis is a time of not only urgent action, it's also a time of the need for deep introspection and reflection. Interestingly, the Chinese word for crisis is weizhi, and its two characters represent danger plus opportunity. And it's the opportunity dimension that we're encouraging leaders, notwithstanding the pressures of the moment, to think about as they reimagine their future. And why is this so critical? Because things will be different. The ecosystem of stakeholders across the value chain, from employees, customers, regulators, investors, will have changed expectations and changed experiences as a result of COVID-19. It's even important because before this crisis, we saw over the last 2 decades what we've described in our research as firestorm disruption. Major fundamental shifts and changes in businesses and industries, driven by technology, digitization, changes to platform and ecosystem business models, changes to the demographic profile of customers and employees. That firestorm disruption was already there. What we see is that COVID-19 will accelerate many of those trends that were already pre-existing. The second problem we were facing in our research, working with these senior leaders, was what we called the legacy trap. The problem that leaders and leadership teams were unable to bust through biases: confirmation bias, status quo bias, the looking in the blinkered rear view of past successes rather than imagining changed and transformed futures. So that was why we started to work on a method to break through the legacy trap and to take advantage of firestorm disruption. And we called that the Phoenix Encounter Method. And the proposition here at the center of this is very simple. Burn your business to the ground. and imagine rising phoenix-like from the ashes. And the imagination of this then feeds into debate, a wider range of strategic options and changes. And we've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of major businesses around the world use this methodology systematically to be able to create that wider option set and then come up with a set of tactical and strategic activities. And we'll share examples of that as we go through our presentation. But fundamentally, this encounter method relies on a principle we call radical ideation. This goes well beyond traditional scenario planning or wargaming to the notion that you bring as many multiple perspectives in and you have a strategic debate that imagines somebody completely destroying your business and industry with unconstrained firepower. And the unconstrained element has been a very important feature of our research, showing that it helps bust through those legacy blinker traps. And then bring that into an extreme and dramatic wargaming analysis, which is a series of debates. An attack debate which imagines unconstrained devastation and what forces of contemporary firepower, business models, platforms, ecosystems, technology, demographic shifts, you would bring in to destroy either the firm or the organization or the industry, and then a horizon defense. What would be the immediate to short-term, then medium-term and long-term options that are available to both fortify the core of the business and release resources, and you do transformational projects and innovation. Now, to help in this opposites debate requires people with an outside-in view, looking at the external environment and doing a habit which is part of the Phoenix attitude of leadership, which we call proactive scanning. That is looking well beyond industries and geographies for ideas that are emerging elsewhere that can be used for both attack and for defense, and then engaging the debate around that. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Sameer, who is going to take us through a short scan of some Phoenix attitude-like thinking related to technology.
Thanks, Ian. Now, if we're going to talk about the future, and we're going to talk about being a Phoenix leader who is proactive and looking forward, we have to talk about technology. It is bringing about some of the most fierce disruption that we have ever seen. Now, you could say that, well, what's new about that? We've always seen technology-based disruption since the discovery of electricity or the invention of the steam engine. We have indeed. But what we've never seen is the scale, the scope, and the speed of how quickly things are changing in today's world, which is why the Phoenix leader, the proactive leader, has to have a very proactive ability and a scan to see what's going on and then understand what this means to them. Now, in order to make sense of the world of technology, it makes it easier to categorize them into two buckets. The first bucket is what we would call as indispensable technology or essential technology. Essentially, they comprise of three technologies: cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and big data and analytics. These three technologies are what we consider as the backbone of what is enabling all other technologies to accelerate and to disrupt businesses out there. Now, what is very important for a Phoenix leader is to realize that these technologies are not merely meant to give you an advantage that can help you lower your costs. The way to think about these technologies is, can these be used in a way to give you strategic advantage? For example, allowing you to create a new business model or allowing you to create new forms of engagement with the customers. Let me give you a quick example. Some of you may have heard of this company called Hippo. It is a home insurance company, an old legacy industry. But what Hippo is doing is it takes data from public records, combines that data with geospatial satellite data, analyzes it using smart algorithms, and is able to provide insurance products and services to its customers in a matter of minutes. And this is something which was unheard of in this industry. And that is what I mean by creating strategic advantage by leveraging technology and not just lowering your costs. Now, build on these three basic technologies, there are a bunch of what we call as targeted technologies that are being developed. Now, you may, and to name a few of these technologies, it's Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, robotics, blockchain, just to name a few. Now, here is the interesting part for a Phoenix leader. You see, a big misconception would be that, well, many of these technologies are not relevant to me. My industry is a service industry, and hence, I don't think 3D printing or autonomous vehicles has an impact on me. What we are now noticing is that these technologies are not locked into some silo of an industry. When used in a combination, and perhaps even a creative combination, these technologies can have disruptive impact on various industries, okay? And hence you have to keep your eye open on every technology out there. Now, to give you an example, let's just look at the auto industry, right? Legacy industry, again, very difficult for newcomers to come in. Here comes a new entrant, Local Motors, that uses 3D printing and autonomous vehicle and electrification of vehicles, put it all together and produces this shuttle bus called Oli, which is an autonomous, 3D printed autonomous electric shuttle, driving around theme parks today, driving around college university towns today, taking students or tourists from one place to the other. This is the power of combining technologies in a unique way and challenging the status quo of an industry, the auto industry, which is not very well known for newcomers coming in. The point is very simple. You need to have a scan, and as a Phoenix leader, you need to be proactive in thinking how these technologies can be exploited, perhaps in different combination, to give you strategic advantage rather than being caught blindsided by somebody else, unknown or unexpected, coming into your industry and then giving you a run for your money. Okay, now the way I can highlight this a little bit further is to give you an example from a company that is very well known as disruptor, and now it's one of the biggest established companies in the world, right? Alibaba. Now we know Alibaba's success from its online business, but let me tell you that this company realized very quickly that yes, their online business is fantastic, but they need to constantly be proactive and ahead of the curve. And one of the things they realize is that online is not the only way to do business. If you have to engage with customers, you also need some physical presence. So they started getting into physical retail store-based business, but they wouldn't just enter the legacy retail store business. They started the HEMA stores, or what is known as the new retail concept, essentially creating a seamless experience for customers between their online and offline shopping, leveraging their digital capabilities, providing personalized recommendation. If something was not available on the store, people could still order it, and it would immediately, within a matter of minutes or at best a few hours, be delivered in their home using a last mile online delivery network that Alibaba had already built. They also had in-store kitchens where people could go buy their groceries in the store, and just after buying could go to the kitchen, and the kitchen would serve those very groceries in a cooked form to them. And the kitchens were powered by robotics in the back to make sure that the cost structure is well maintained. Now, here is the interesting part. This concept of retail that they created not only helped them capture more than 10 million customers in the retail world in China, it actually helped them then provide digital retail as a service to big brands out there like Starbucks. It also helped them provide digital retail as a service to more than 10 million mom and pop retailers in China, which exploded their ability to basically have a footprint in the retail market in the world. And if you think about it today, Alibaba is not just a player in China, it's becoming the platform of the world. It has exact information of who in the world needs what and who in the world has that. And they are able to connect those dots to essentially become the matchmaker for the world. Even during the COVID crisis, this digital ability that Alibaba had created helped them manage the COVID crisis really, really amazingly. When the entire country was gone into lockdown, their digital capabilities helped it survive during the lockdown period, which we know many parts of the world were struggling with, right? Or are still struggling with. The point I'm trying to make, again, is very simple. Being proactive, understanding how technologies and business models can be combined, can be a way forward for Phoenix type leaders to make sure that their companies stay ahead of the curve. Now, what you've heard from me, folks, so far is sort of the supply side of the story. I've only talked about the technology and the adopters of the technology and what can they do to change their business models. But this conversation is incomplete till we don't talk about the demand side of the stories, the consumers. How are they going to interact with the technology? What are the things that they want companies to do for them? And once we understand both the supply and the demand side of the story, that's when we can start understanding how the paradigm of business is going to shift, especially as we come out of this crisis. That's when we'll understand how new ecosystems will be formed, especially as we come out of this crisis. And more importantly, if you have to be a Phoenix leader, what is it that you need to do to make sure that your organization is ahead of the curve rather than scrambling to catch up? And in order to talk about that part of the story, the demand part of the story, and then put it together in terms of what ecosystems will be created, let me hand over the baton to my colleague Paddy, who will take us through the next phase of this webinar.
All right. Thank you very much, Sameer. So remember, the point here is the following. What Sameer said is you now have a palette of technologies that you could use to think of going after different industries, creating new ways of doing business. What I want to alert you is the fact that while that is important as it is, if you don't pay attention to the fact that the whole world of consumers are changing, that is going to create a huge demand. And if you're not ready to respond to the change, you could be blindsided again. The first thing that's changing the way consumers think is the reality that we live in, which is the digital reality, which is today, for the first time on Earth, there are more devices on Earth than there are people on Earth. What this means is the world is more connected than it was ever before. And what this connection is implied is, unlike in the analog world, in today's world, information flows freely. And this information flow is no longer controlled. It is not like one to many, it's many to many. And what this has done is a couple of very, very interesting things that I'll sort of highlight over the next few minutes. The first is it's basically led people to ask the question, can I reimagine the future? Do I need to keep doing things the same way I used to do it before, or can I actually do it differently? It also then leads to the next question, which is, beyond just doing things differently, the new world of digital and social actually allows you to do different things than you could do in the analog world. And the best way to exemplify these two is to actually take you through two examples. The first is a company called Glossier. This is a company that does cosmetics, focused largely on women. But what this company does is completely different to what you might see with an Estee Lauder or an SK2 or even a Sephora. Most of the traditional business industry is very brick and mortar, very detail oriented. That's the way they do it. Glossier has none of those things. They do cosmetics, they do it through social media. Everything is digital, and this company is a unicorn. And if you think this only happened in the developed world, let me give you another example which comes from the developing world. And this is a company called Tringo, in an industry that's about as old as it comes, which is agriculture. Now, Tringo is from India, and those of you who've been to India and the emerging markets will realize one of the characteristics of those markets is farmers have very, very small land holdings, with the end result that they can't even afford, let alone think of buying mechanized equipment like tractors. What Mahindra & Mahindra does, which is one of the world's biggest manufacturers of tractors, is to say, that's fine. If you can't afford a tractor, just let us know what kind of equipment you want, whether it's a tractor, whether it's a seeder, whether it's a harvester, et cetera, et cetera. Tell us when you want it, where you want it, and we'll have it ready for you in your farm. And by the way, if you don't know how to drive, not only will we give you the equipment, we'll actually send a driver along with it as well. The point I'm trying to make is if you look at Glossier, if you look at Tringo, What these organizations have are leaders that Ian called leaders with the Phoenix attitude. They are able to scan technology. They are able to look at digital, and they are going to figure out how might these disrupt my industry? How might this kill my business? And once they do that, they now figure out how can I leverage these technologies? How can I leverage digital to build this up, to transform the way I think about it? And while we talk about digital and technology, what you have to realize is what COVID has done is put this on steroids. Look at the comment made by Satya Nadella just last week. What has happened with regards to digital transformation in the past 2 months would have probably happened in 2 years otherwise. So what COVID has done is completely accelerate this process of digital transformation. So the question for you when you're leading your business is, what are you doing in terms of looking at this for renewal and for transformation? The next thing that I want to get on to when I sort of combine digital and social and connect it with the demand side, if you will, is digital and social have actually combined to create a new way of doing business, and the people who love it are the consumers. What has changed with digital and social relative to the analog world is in the analog world, consumers strictly had a preference for what products they wanted to buy. And if you built it, they would come to them. But in the world of platforms, in the world of ecosystems, what consumers are saying is increasingly in today's world, not only do I have preference for what I want to buy, equally importantly, I have preferences for how I want to buy and how I want to consume. And if you don't provide me those attributes, it doesn't matter how good your product is. I'm not going to buy it. So satisfying customers in today's world has become a lot more difficult because they not only want quality, they want traceability, they want visibility, they want availability, they want delivery. And the beauty of the platform ecosystem model is it can do this all. It can do this with a one-stop shop. This one-stop shop reduces, if not eliminates, all the frictions and transactions of the analog world. More importantly, this one-stop shop creates network externality effects that allow these platforms to run their businesses using economic models that are completely different from the analog players. And the last thing that makes this such a powerful model is once you do a one-stop platform ecosystem, you have a fantastic wealth of data. And the possibilities of the data are best illustrated by this company called Ping An. This was a company that used to make insurance. They basically have completely digitally transformed the business to the fact that today Ping An is not just in insurance, it's in banking, it's in finance, it's in healthcare, it's in entertainment, it's in housing, it's in auto, it's got a whole peer-to-peer setup. The whole point here is what platforms like Ping An show is this model can scale and mutate across industries. And COVID has essentially allowed these models to scale even faster than it was before. Just look back on which companies have grown in the past 2 months. It's Amazon, it's Shopify. In fact, Shopify has grown even faster than Amazon. It's Alibaba, it's Grab, it's Jio. And the point you have to realize is the companies that run platforms can mutate across not just industries and sectors, they can mutate across geographies. And that's the last part I'm going to get at to, which is to say some of the most innovative things that are happening with regards to platform and ecosystems and digital and social is actually in the emerging markets. For those of you been to emerging markets, you realize they always have a lot more problems than developed markets. But the beauty of digital and social and platform and technology is they allow these emerging markets to pole vault over their infrastructure deficits, with the end result, some of the most innovative thinking and doing in terms of reimagining and transforming are actually happening in these geographies. Everybody talks about China, so let me give you 2 examples from India. The first is a company called Baiju, okay? Baiju, think of Baiju, they are a learning app, think of them like the equivalent of Netflix, but for education. They run a freemium model, which allows people to come on board free, look at their content, and then if you like it, convert it to an annual membership. The beauty of their concept is such, and the beauty of their content is so good, people who come on to freemium actually convert to an annual subscription. And the annual subscription is more expensive per year than Netflix. And the beauty of their model, which allows them to be a profitable unicorn, is that once they make the content, the shelf life of this content is long-lived. It's unlike Netflix, where they have to keep creating new content every season. So what you have is Baiju leveraging the content, leveraging the economics to become profitable. The other example is a company called Rebel Foods, which many people have not heard of. They are the world's biggest internet restaurant. They are out of India. And those of you who've heard this, you will realize that in the world of business, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And if you look at the Rolodex of imitators of Rebel Foods, the list includes Uber Eats, it includes Deliveroo, it includes Grubhub, it includes Meituan, it includes Cloud Kitchen. The point here is some of these new upstarts in the emerging markets are growing and scaling like there's no tomorrow. And what you have to keep in mind is the founders of these enterprises are a bit like the virus of COVID. They really don't care about boundaries. So the question for you is, even if you're not interested in emerging markets, are you scanning? Because they could be in other markets very soon. And in particular, what are you going to do to figure out what do these things mean as they relate to you in terms of figuring out how might this disrupt your business? What does this mean in terms of renewal of your business? And what does this mean in terms of the transformation of your businesses to make it future ready going forward? Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Paddy. So one of the things with Phoenix-like leaders that we've seen is the idea that they stretch the boundaries of their option set. And a really dramatic example of this was about 2.5 years ago. We had the CEO of a major hospital in the Asia Pacific region. And they went through an encounter exercise that included an attack that involved an Ebola-like virus suddenly being in the community and being massive stretch on healthcare. Who would be the successful hospital and medical provider in that environment? Now, as a result of the extreme attack, that leader and their leadership team developed a series of potential options, starting with pilot projects. Specific pilot projects in using robotics for service delivery within the hospital for safe and sanitation reasons. Secondly, the utilization of a pilot in artificial intelligence, not only for patient monitoring, but for data analytics that monitored quality control. And thirdly, a re-optimization of the supply chain to be able to have a range of possible backup service providers for critical infrastructure and supplies. Now, this particular hospital and the leaders are now paying a benefit to those people that they're serving because they had those pilots running and they were imagining that future 2.5 years ago. So in your own leadership team, who is taking responsibility for insight generation? The scanning of the environment to find out what is happening elsewhere at the moment and what trends might be emerging relating to customers, employees, supply chain, technology utilization, accelerated digital transformation, and who's creating those insights, capturing them, and then sharing them as part of an ongoing leadership dialogue. Because Phoenix-like leaders want as wide an option set first, and then they subject to stress test it. And this requires the opposites debate. And at the center of the psychological research we've done on this with leaders, it's busting through that blinkering, that looking in the past, that legacy trap. It's not a comfortable thing for a senior leader to be confronted in a debate that says, I disagree with you, this is old world thinking. But the Phoenix-like leader gets with resilience and courage through that emotional state and enters into a constructive dialogue. For this, diversity of views and opinion is absolutely central. And the opposites debate needs to be structured and it needs to be methodical. Our research has shown that a lot of processes of strategic dialogue are too specific to an industry. the idea of an encounter method, which provokes different ideas, was designed to be agnostic to industry and allow leaders to engage in a dialogue, irrespective whether or not they're in the profit world, the non-profit world, the public sector world, in any industry or any geography in the world. So as we go through this crisis, the priorities at the moment are around surviving and stabilizing, but we're urging leaders to have that dialogue and debate, that opposites debate, to surge forth post the COVID-19 situation. For this, the Phoenix Encounter is suggesting that that's an option set that is both about fortifying the core and making sure that core is robust coming out and may have changes to it as a result of stakeholder interactions, employees, customers, and the like. And then secondly, an option set to transform the future. That's really what a Phoenix-like leader is thinking about. And that's what really Phoenix Encounter method as a system is there. The other thing about this particular method is it's not only agnostic to context, it's extremely complementary with a lot of other different forms of strategic thinking and analysis, scenario analysis, other forms of wargaming, product and service value creation through Blue Ocean and the like. It's complementary, but it tackles that firestorm disruption and legacy trap problem. And we have a book website. The book will be out much, much later in the year. If you want to pre-register, get our newsletter and information, you can do that at phoenixencounter.com. So Stuart, we hand back to you, and I know a lot of questions are there, and thank you for the opportunity about participating in this as part of the ideas mix of the day.